So let's go over the ranges really quickly. Here is the small blind 3-betting range that I'm going to use. It's 17.5%, which is probably more aggressive 3-betting ranges than most people are used to. But you're going to have to 3-bet the button really aggressively to prevent him from opening super, super wide. And as you'll see in just a minute, if the button's opening even reasonably wide, like 45% or so, he has to defend really wide against a 3-bet. So here's the range I chose. I don't want to cold call very much in the small blind, so we have pretty good 3-bet bluff randomizers, like a lot of ace-x and king-x suited, which is nice. A lot of suited connectors and suited gappers, and then even a few pocket pairs I didn't want to call with. The good hands here are pretty much 10s and better, king jack and better, and ace 10 and better. And I've talked about it in other videos, but especially for pre-flop play and flop play, the terms value bet and bluff really don't work perfectly. You still use them. I used to use them more than I like to use them now. But what I don't want anyone to do is to think of king jack off as like a bluff or a value bet pre-flop. King jack off, it does decently well in a 3-bet pot if our opponent calls in the button, but also we hate getting 4-bet, and even king jack off is really happy when we 3-bet a pre-flop and we made our opponent fold a hand like 10-6 suited, because 10-6 suited will outdraw our king jack off all the time. So yeah, so don't really think about a lot of these hands up here, or even the hands around here as really necessarily bluffs or value 3-bets. They're just hands that play well in 3-bet pots that are also happy if we make our opponent fold a high equity hand in position pre-flop. Okay, so here's the button calling range. Notice I have him slow playing aces like a boss. So yeah, here's the button calling range. Again, there's some things that can maybe be tweaked here a little bit. It's possible that ace queen suited or so is a 4-bet or something like that. But for the most part, I think this looks pretty reasonable. You'll notice this range is a lot wider than probably most people are used to playing with. And a lot of the hands we're calling with here, we're not happy to call. Like, we don't really want to have to call with king 10 off or ace 4 suited. It's just, if we fold, the button's already lost their 2 big blind or 2.5 big blind open, and calling the 3-bet overall will lose less money than folding to it. So here is the button defending range, and again, if the button's defending much less than this, then it's going to let the blinds just 3-bet super aggressively and profitably pre-flop. All right, cool. So I've already plugged in the pre-flop ranges to PokerStove, and it looks like the 3-betting range has about 52% equity, and the button calling range has about 48% equity. So the button is in position and got a good price on the call pre-flop when he faced a 3-bet, but remember, the small blinds range has a much better distribution of equity. The small blinds range has much more premium hands, and then a lot of its, I'm going to say the word bluffs, a lot of its bluffs retain their equity very well. So just keep that in mind. This could mean that the small blind 3-betting range is a little bit too wide, or the button's not calling wide enough, but this is where we're going to start. Okay, so let's do it. Let's randomly generate one. All right, so that's a pretty reasonable one to start with. So now we're going to analyze this spot the same way I always analyze single raise pots. So if you're like me, you have way, way more experience with single raise pots than 3-bet pots. But yeah, it's going to be the same type of analysis. We just want to write down the flop, how many combos we have, then design our betting, check calling, check raising range, all that fun stuff. And then we'll just learn from there. So total combos, we have 211 on this board. And then now we need to figure out sort of what kind of hands we want to bet, what do we want to check call with, what do we want to check raise with. So since I'm new to this, and I imagine most people watching this are too, they haven't spent much time with these ranges actually writing everything down, I would just start with what seems like the easiest stuff. So, for example, I would check call pocket queens because I'm removing almost all the queens from my opponent's range, and it's nice to check call some really strong hands. I would also check raise pocket fives because I want to be able to defend my checking range by check raising sometimes, and pocket fives seem like they fit the bill pretty well for that. I also think, though I could be wrong, so I don't want to start writing it down yet, we can maybe check call with hands like pocket aces with an ace of diamonds, because that allows our opponent to like runner some tainted flush draws and stuff like that, and our hand's not very vulnerable, but we might end up betting with that. So, just starting out with the easier stuff. So what kind of hands would I definitely value bet? I think I'm going to definitely value bet kings. I don't remove any of my opponent's queens, so we can have all of his ace-queen combos. I do block his king-queen, but he can have his queen-jack, and I think even queen-10 too. So I'm going to start with value betting kings. I'm also going to value bet ace-queen. That's 12 combos right now. King-queen looks close, but I'm going to go ahead and start with value betting it. We'll just fix it later if we need to. And that looks like a pretty good starting point, although it's not betting very aggressively. So we might want to add in some more combos. But we'll be adding in bluffs and draws in just a second.